It's time for Recipe of the Day. Happy Thanksgiving! I hope you're having a beautiful day. And if you want a quick little idea to do something festive and fun, I've got one for you. I'm telling you how to make mulled wine today, which is more traditionally served around Christmas, but I have a variation where you chill it and then serve it on ice with cranberries to make kind of like a festive sangria that is just perfect for Thanksgiving. So I'm going to tell you how to make the mulled wine, and then I'll tell you how to do the sangria variation. So this is the mulled wine that I learned to make from my British in-laws. They live in England still, and they always make mulled wine, and I kind of fell in love with it when I used to go spend Christmas with them. They would often buy these little sachets that had the seasonings or like the spices in them already, and then they would just throw that into the wine. But sometimes they would have the spices that they would use if they didn't have those sachets. And usually, no matter what they were doing, even if they had the little packet of spices, they would take cloves and stud them into a little orange, and that goes into the mixture as well. So that is what we're doing. I will say the thing that is not traditional that I did not learn from them, but I started doing at some point, and I don't know why or how, is I add a few peppercorns to the mixture. I find it gives kind of that like little warm bite that you get from cloves, but just kind of a different note. And you know how sometimes red wines are described as having a peppercorn note to them? I find it works really well with the wine in that way. And as I'm telling you how to make this, I'm also going to say that you can do exactly the same thing except using just basic apple juice, and it turns into like a warm cider drink that people who aren't drinking alcohol or children can enjoy. Just note, of course, at the end of when I'm telling you how to make the mulled wine, I'm going to say that you can add some brandy or cognac or orange liqueur to it. Don't do that if you want this to be alcohol free, right? Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to get 2 oranges, like small, like mandarin or clementine kind of oranges, and you are going to poke some cloves into there, whole cloves. Now, if that's hard, sometimes the cloves kind of break as you try to push them through the orange. You can use a paring knife to poke the holes and then stick the cloves in. I will also just say that the actual recipe that I'm linking to for this doesn't have you put the cloves in the oranges. It has you poke holes in the oranges and then just toss those in with the wine. Now, the reasoning here is that I actually strain this whole mulled wine through a fine mesh sieve, so any little bits get taken out of it. I think the studying of the orange was both to help some of the orange flavors get out from the skin and from inside the orange. You're poking the holes for that. And I think it was also to keep the cloves with the orange. You pull the orange out before serving, and then the cloves come out too. But since we are straining it, you don't have to poke them all into the orange. You can just poke some holes in the orange, and then you'll toss the cloves in with the rest of the seasonings, okay? I guess the reason for poking the cloves into the oranges, and I still do it quite often, is just because it's traditional and it looks nice, right? Okay, so you have poked your oranges with holes, maybe put some cloves into them, and then you're putting those into a large pot along with 2 750 milliliter bottles of a full-bodied red wine. So that's 1.5 liters of wine. It can be one of those big bottles. People always ask me what kind of wine. I'm going to tell you, this is not where you pull out those expensive bottles. Save that for when you're drinking it by itself. You could use something much more affordable for making mulled wine, just like one of those big 1.5 liter bottles, or you could use box wine. What you do really want here, though, is something nice and full-bodied and flavorful, because you want that real richness, you know? So I usually go for a Merlot or a Red Zinfandel, Cab Sauvignon, Grenache, those sorts of things, okay? So it's 1.5 liters of the wine into the big pot with the oranges, and then you do 2 cinnamon sticks, 2 tablespoons of whole allspice berries, and then your total amount of whole cloves is 2 tablespoons. If you put some into the oranges, you will then put less into the whole mixture, or you can, I guess, stud 2 whole tablespoons full into the oranges. Those are going to be very well studded oranges. Then, if you'd like, if you want to do what I do, go in with 10 to 15 whole peppercorns for that little bit of extra bite. Okay, now you're going to bring that pot to just up to the boil over medium-high heat, stirring it occasionally, then reduce it down to low and simmer it for 20 to 30 minutes. Okay, now at that point, those spices are going to be pretty intensely flavoring there, and you've got the wine. You need to bring in some sweetness, and this is up to you how sweet you want it to be. And it depends on how sweet and or fruity the wine was to start with. It's going to be about 3/4 of a cup to 1.5 cups of brown sugar that you're going to stir in. Start with a little less than that if you want. Start with 1/2 cup, stir it in, let it kind of dissolve into there, give it a taste, and you just keep adding until it tastes just nice to you. Then, this is where I do like to strain the mulled wine, just because a lot of those spices kind of like break apart a little bit. You get like a fine dust or film in the wine. You don't want that. So a fine mesh sieve, like a colander that's made out of metal that's really fine, over a big bowl, and then you pour the mulled wine through there. If you're serving it immediately, rinse out your pot so there's no little bits of spice left clinging to the edges there, and pour the wine back into the pot. Bring it back over medium-low heat just until it's nice and warm again. And then, if you'd like to, it is very traditional to stir in a little bit of extra alcohol. I think my mother-in-law used to say that the simmering of the wine takes the alcohol out, and so you need to add it back in. That might have been my father-in-law, actually. I'm not sure. But one of them said that. And so you're going to add in a few glugs of brandy or cognac or orange liqueur just to bring in that alcohol again if you want to. You don't have to. Now, that is going to add a little bit of, I'm going to say, bitterness. It's not exactly bitterness, but it's bringing something in that's going to detract away from the sweetness you added. You're going to stir that. You might want to add a little bit more brown sugar. Then you ladle that into mugs, and you can optionally garnish it with cinnamon sticks, orange slices, apple slices. Dried apple with a cinnamon stick is really pretty, especially for Thanksgiving if you're making this now. Those are great options. Now, I promised a sangria version. So what you're going to do is everything I just said, same thing about the brown sugar, same thing about the spices, the oranges, same thing about if you want to add the brandy, cognac, or orange liqueur, none of that changes. What does change is you're going to cool it down. Now, it could just come down to room temperature or chill it in the fridge. I really do think the colder the better, but if you don't have a lot of time, you just don't want it warm. We're trying to do like an ice cube thing here, right? We don't want it to melt all the ice cubes. So I think it is best to chill it completely in the fridge. And then once it's cold, what you're going to do is take some big wine glasses, like the kind of thing used for like an Aperol spritz, or like goblets, like water goblets, that kind of thing. You're going to add to it ice and either fresh or frozen cranberries. And then you pour that mulled wine over top, give it a little stir. You can still garnish with the cinnamon stick, the apple. Any of those are going to work. And if it's Christmas, you call it Christmas sangria. And if it's Thanksgiving, you call it Thanksgiving sangria. There you go. Cheers. I hope you have a beautiful Thanksgiving. I am so grateful to you out there listening. You help my business grow. You sustain us. You make the recipes and comment on them. Tell me what you love. It really makes it so fun and so worthwhile to be doing this. So thank you very much. I'm Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, the all-new chicken cookbook, cookfor2.us, and from this podcast, recipe of the day. Happy Thanksgiving. Let's get cooking.